we doing, everybody? And welcome to episode 3 of the Paul Talk podcast. We have a very nervous guest with us, first time ever on a podcast, joined by Karen Ellis. Karen worked with me in Barlinnie, HMP Barlinnie, before moving and travelling the world. But before we talk to Karen, I'll give you a shout out to our sponsor, which is Starner Apparel. Starner Apparel is an independent fashion brand from Scotland, creating high quality and stylish attire for on and off the terraces, inspired by terrace culture, lifestyle and music, and all of the clothing is designed using quality materials and workmanship to combine the very best style and fit. All of this means you get premium quality fashion at affordable prices while enjoying a simple and secure service. You can check them out at www.starnerapparel.co.uk. Karen was going to do a jingle, but then she bottled it and didn't he?
I didn't want everyone to switch off 2 minutes in.
I don't think many people are listening after I did that anyway. So, how's things? How have you been?
Yeah, good. It's been crazy since both. When did we work together? How long ago was that?
Well, I left in 2019. So, after that,
I'm trying to do the maths. 4 years?
4 years.
Yeah, it's been an interesting couple of years.
So, talk us through, right? Tell people a wee bit about yourself. Obviously, I know you pretty well, but people who are listening might not know you. So tell us a wee bit about your background before we get into the kind of meat of what you've been doing the last few years.
Probably short version of the story. Background would be, obviously we know each other from working in the jail. Worked in the jail for about 9 or 10 years. 9 years. Around about the middle of COVID, you just have that there's more to life moment. The more to life moment hit hard. So packed it in, sold the house, put my wee backpack on and tottered off, not knowing what I was doing, and still don't know what I'm doing.
See, to be fair, for people that don't know what working in a prison's like, it's a very secure job. It's not the most difficult job. People will say, oh, I could never work there. We know that it's very easy at times to work in a prison, which how did you find being a female working in a prison?
Honestly, I get asked this question a lot, and it's a hard one to answer. I think I didn't find it any different. It's a weird, I don't know. It's in some ways easier, I would guess. But it's not. I think a lot of people have that intimidation thing. Do you feel really threatened? Do you feel you become really desensitized to the environment and it becomes really normal? You find yourself talking about situations you're in, but if I was having that conversation with you in a work environment, it would just roll off the tongue and nobody would bat an eyelid. But you speak about some of the situations out with, and this is something I really noticed when I left the jail. You talk about things that happened and people are like, oh my God, how did you deal with that? And you're like, I don't know, it was just Tuesday. That's just what happened today, and that's what we done, and you just get on with it.
What I find is when you tell people stories, and obviously I have this with my current job as well, you tell people stories and you go, that's terrible, and you go, you don't find that funny? And you're like, that's funny. And you're like, no, that's no. Then you start to realise that's no funny, but you develop the black humour and you just end up dealing with that's how you deal with it.
It totally is. And you have this automatic programming that just kicks in when anything happens. And like you say, the humour does kick into it. How much I carry on and a laugh did you have day to day? And what ultimately from the outside people look in as a really serious job, but you'll never find a better group of people to work with. And that it just becomes this almost family dynamic, if you like, but it's just a big carry on. But it's a coping mechanism for what you're dealing with at the time, and really stepping out of that, you see how heightened you are all the time. Again, you'll probably have it in your work in certain situations as well still now, but you operate at this level where you're up here all the time, and it's not until you step out that you realise that, and you have this degree of harshness about you that's just this ingrained, almost robotic way of dealing with things, because you just have to. And when you step out, you realise that I don't know, I've had a few conversations since I've left, and it's been things that I'm really quite clinical about, and other people are like, how do you deal with that? Or how do you? I'm like, you just do, you just get up and you go on with it, you deal with it, and that's what you do.
What's it like for you? Obviously, I'm still in a similar environment, so the people I spend time with are basically like-minded, and it is what it is. You mentioned there when you left, you would talk to people and you start to realise the difference. What is the difference? Because I still don't know.
Oh, I'm trying. It's just like when you're in that environment 24/7 and it's your way, like the world's a lot softer. Is kind of, I think, what you realise is like the world is a lot softer, and a lot of that stuff, while it is your normal in that environment, isn't normal. And like that level of, I'm not saying normal as in judging it, but you kind of, you realise you've got a wall or a front that's there that is almost like your game face that has to be there. And I don't think you realise that doesn't come down. And I think, I don't know, you might not see this, or you might or might not, but it takes a lot to really bring your nervous system back down to a level that you step out of that uniform, if you like.
So
I think
what differences have you felt in the last few years of being outside, not being in that environment?
in what sense?
Well, what you're saying, I kind of understand, but I don't really understand what you're saying because I've had 10 years, the last 10 years of my life, this has been what it's like. And I actually don't understand what it's like not to be in that environment anymore.
I'm trying to think of the best way I would describe it. It's not like an overnight thing, and it's like it's not something that I don't think I'll ever fully leave. Well, I'm not saying I'll never fully leave you, but you become aware of almost this like steel that you're made of. That you don't. I don't know the best way to articulate. It's not like you don't change as a person. Like one thing I've found, there's a lot that's different about me in the last few years, but fundamentally, a lot of me still the same person. And a lot of the things I took for the jail, so that ability, that kind of resilience that you get, is that not the core values, or what's that framework that's in there? Ingrained in here somewhere, determined and resilient or something. But like that resilience is really in there, and that doesn't leave you, but just your need for it steps down, and you don't realise you need it. Like I don't remember ever feeling stressed or heightened in the jail, or ever feeling under threat, even in some of the most ridiculous, dangerous situations I've been in. You don't actually feel under threat in a situation because your adrenaline goes and your fight or flight kicks in, and you just crack on, and that's your day. And then you go to the gym, you have a couple of donuts, you have a carry on, and that's it. But yeah, I don't know, you just almost realise that you don't have to always be on, and you really step back, and it takes a while. It doesn't just go, and you need to be out the environment. You can have a week's leave, and nothing will really shift. It's when you're really out of it for a while that you start. I don't know the best way to explain it, but there's just this wall that melts, that you don't have to always be heightened. But the other amazing side of it is that resilience, and that like sense of what's going on round about you is always there.
I find it different. It's funny, you're the first person I've ever spoke to that has left and like completely left and does something that isn't the same thing anymore. And it's now that we're talking, I kind of think I've never thought about this before. I know people who don't work in that environment.
I know.
They don't understand in a sense. I've never thought about it before. It's never crossed my mind. But what made you join the prison in the first place? Because you would only been what, about 21 or something when you joined?
I think I was 19.
19, there you go.
19. I think I was 18 or 19. I hated my job at the time, and this was more money.
It must have been bad wages that you got in your old job.
I worked in a call centre at the time. I worked for a Sky call centre. I don't know, it wasn't terrible, but the role I was in was actually all right, but it was just there was nothing about it that excited me, so there was no thought in jumping job. And then this came up, and the reason I didn't apply in the first place, actually I applied a year later, was I didn't think I had the experience or they would take me seriously, which is really interesting. I love how much you judge yourself for everything. But like, I admit that was me back at like 16, 17, whenever it was. I'm like, oh, they'll not take me seriously because I've not like kind of clue what I was doing. Still don't know what I'm doing. But yeah, I just pretty much was like, that'll do. There was no passion in it, no excitement. It was never something that I was like, oh my God, this is what I want to be. But I had no idea when I left school, I had no idea what I wanted to do and what really excited me in that sense. And you know, sometimes you go maybe do a degree or do whatever, and you've got a direction you want to go in. Didn't have a clue. And I think that's the case for so many people. And you're almost at that age forced into something because that's what you do. You get a job, you go and do the thing. And I think people are kind of shoeboxed into that. And then you get comfortable and it becomes really difficult to leave.
I was talking to somebody, actually I can't remember, I was talking to last week, and no, do you know what it was? It was talking rubbish. It was episode 2 of this, Gordon Duncan, and he was talking about how he was good at English and he was good with writing and words.
Mm-hmm.
So he kind of got shoehorned into journalism.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, that's something I think you suffer from, where if you do a degree, people expect that you have to go and do something related to that degree.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you put a certain amount of pressure on yourself because you've spent so much time. Your parents might expect a certain level of work or whatever from you, and you end up just going, I'll just do this thing because that's what's expected, or I'm good at something, so I just go and do it.
I think that's what it comes down to. It's the expectation. A lot of people don't do, and this is a shift that like you're kind of starting to see, and I'd love to see so much more of it, but whatever the reason, whatever the expectation is, or whatever someone's expectation is, people do things because of the expectations rather than because it really excites them or it's something they want to do. And there's so much, and it's everywhere. It's like wherever you go, everywhere has their own like cultural conditioning, but there's so much that you're raised to be that's not inherently you and isn't inherently what you're here to do, or like what's really true to you as a person. But it's just that like you grow up and you go through the motions in whatever environment you grew up in, and it takes, this is why travel's a big thing for me. For me, like traveling's not about like seeing, like I mean, I love some of the places I've seen and visited and done, but it's not about seeing cool places and experiencing cool things. It's almost about like seeing who you are out with your environment.
Mm-hmm.
So if you take yourself completely out of your environment, completely out of all the expectations, completely out of all your upbringing, conditioning, everything, not to say there's anything wrong with it, but when you take yourself out of that, what happens?
See, I'm going to touch on your travelling. I'm just going to kind of come back to that. But
Mm-hmm.
on you saying that, coming out your environment, obviously, like my wife, you know Siobhan well, working with her as well. And I remember saying to her when you left, and she agreed with me, I remember thinking, that's so brave of her. And some people would say, oh, well, she's just gone travelling. She's young, she's single, she doesn't have any massive commitments. She's just gone travelling. But that way of saying, when you come out your environment, that would terrify me. Where you know me, I'm quite a confident person. I'm happy to speak to people and I put myself in places at times that can be uncomfortable. But the idea of me leaving and going, say like you went Mexico first, doing that just myself, I would have been terrified.
Why?
Because I don't know enough about me, I suppose. I don't know how I would deal with it. In my opinion, in my head, I think I'll go there and I don't know anybody. I don't know where I am. I don't know what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's terrifying.
What do you mean you don't know enough of the and you don't know what would happen? You don't know what the
I don't,
expectation would be,
I
or
don't know. I don't know what, like, how did it feel for you when you just left and you went yourself? What was your thought process at that time?
actually, so this is the bit that I was really calm about. One thing I will always say to myself, I mean, I still day to day, I'm like, I've got no idea what I'm doing, but I know that I'll figure it out. And I don't really, the panic, like you're saying, you know what you do when you get there, that's never really been a thing. I'm like, I'll get there and I'll figure it out. I'll go and I'll see, like I think I booked my hotel maybe 3 days before I went, purely because everybody else's nerves were stressing me out. Because look, where are you going to be? What are you going to do? What if you get murdered? And I'm like, let's get murdered then. Like that's what happens. Like there's some things in life you can't control. But I don't know. I don't know that there was much of a thought process. It was more of like I just need to do this and I know I need to do it and whatever happens, happens. But I had no real expectation. I remember saying this before I left. I'm like, I could go and I could be back in 2 weeks' time. And that's out of my system. Or I could go and I could never come back. And that is what it is and that's where it goes. And I guess I think for me, I had no expectation. I just knew it's something that I had to do. And I had this, you only regret the things in life you don't do. And it's not to say that everybody has to quit their job and travel the world. Maybe it's not for you. Maybe that doesn't maybe it doesn't appeal to you. But if the reason you're not stepping out your environment is because, oh, I don't know how it'll go, then that's not a good enough reason not to do something. Like not knowing how it'll work out or not knowing what'll happen is the reason most people don't do things is fear. They're terrified. And it's normal. Everybody is. And I do shit that terrifies me every day of the fucking week. And I'm just like, we'll figure it out though. But it's a thing that stops you from doing a lot. And there's just weighing up the difference between what are you not doing because you're just not interested, you don't want to do it. That tends to be the things that there's no reaction. Like if someone mentions something to you and you're like, it doesn't matter to you. But if someone like puts an idea there or like you're saying, I've never thought about it, but when I think about it, fear comes up. That's not it's not something you're curious in response. That's I couldn't do that.
I think that the brain makes you try and be comfortable in everything you do, and that's probably why it's a defense mechanism, it's a survival mechanism. But we'll go back on to your traveling in a minute. I just want to see, how was your period through the prison? And I remember, like, now I look back at it, I didn't think it as much at the time, but you were very young, and I remember when you bought your house, and it was quite a big deal, because we worked in a very close-knit group. Everybody was interested, they wanted you to do well. And then obviously you've just decided it wasn't that long after that you bought your house that you just went, that's it, I'm leaving. What was that point in your life like to decide that's it, I'm just leaving?
Interesting. There was, I think it was like the COVID pandemic when everyone had the life meltdown and was like, what's going on? It was kind of in the middle of that. So I had my house about 3 years, but probably in the middle of, did you still work?
I left maybe about a year after you got your house.
I think we've spoke about this before though. I had, in the middle of COVID, I took time out of work to look after my gran who was really unwell at the time and just the whole pandemic situation. And I was like hyper stressed. Like everyone was stressed with the pandemic. I was hyper stressed with her and her situation and just hit this peak of chaos, like absolute chaos, just being so stressed about everything all the time that I knew I just had to wind myself down and come to a level. And then I spent 3 months, maybe, I can't remember how long, the same as if there's locked in the house and not able to do anything. It was very much that like chaotic, over stress, like this needs to go one way or the other. Like you could have ended up tanking 22 bottles of wine just to get through the day, or get a grip of yourself, start figuring it out. So I had started just picked up, actually, do you know what? One of my friends gave me a book, and it's a Fern Cotton one. Is that the right one? Is she the... That's the right one, eh?
You put that on Instagram, that was one of your favourite books, I remember.
Yeah, and I started reading through the book, and I was just like, this isn't what life is. Like, just starting to think back at all the wee things that I had done. Like, I bought my house because you buy a house and that's the things you do, and you go through those. And there's nothing inherently wrong with it either. But again, it's the reasons you're doing things and not like it's expectations. So I don't know what age was I at the time, maybe 25, 26. I'm like, I should have a house by now because you have a house by now and that's what you do. So I'd started to kind of just really sit back and think, what am I doing for me, and what am I doing because it's things you're supposed to do. And I went and done, I'm going to say an 8-week block, about an 8-week-ish block of therapy at the time, and it was amazing. Like, if I can tell anybody to do anything for themselves, it's go and see somebody and speak to somebody and go through just that process is unbelievable. Like, and I think there's a lot of stigma around about it as well. Of, don't get me wrong, I went to a point of like, I was like frantic at the time. I've done it regularly since, not because anything's wrong, just because it's like, you go to the gym.
A wee checkup almost.
No, think that this is the mindset that I want to shift round about it. It's not like going to the doctor. It's not like you go to the gym not because your body's fucked. You go to the gym because you want the best out of it. You don't wait till your body's like a complete riot before you think, I'm going to go and do a workout. You go to train your body and get the best out of it on a regular basis. Like, you run. What do you run for?
Well, running's a therapy for me. So
Well, yeah, it's a form of, yeah, but therapy in that sense, or any kind of work round about your mindset or really digging into anything like that should be like the gym is, but for your mind. And it shouldn't be this stigma that you only deal with it when something's wrong, or you go on a crash diet when you're overweight. Like, it should just be this fundamental part of your life. Like, it's a muscle that you need to exercise. And there's kind of this like concept around like your mindset's like the sets and reps. Like, whatever you train your brain with is what you'll get out of it. And it's the same as the gym. And I think really being able to shift that and make people see that it's such a healthy thing to do, that you would do it for your body in the gym. What's the difference?
I know. See, to be honest, I think stigma is the right word that you used. I think there's a stigma attached to it where somebody says, oh, I'm going to see a psychiatrist, psychologist or whatever. People go, all right, okay, why are you doing that? But I want to go back to what you mentioned, that you were basically frantic before it. How do you mean in that sense?
Just really stressed, but like with all this almost expectation to have your shit together and deal with everything that you realize you put on yourself. So actually the interesting thing is I never made the appointment with the therapist until I had got to a point that I'd almost worked through a lot of it myself, which was really interesting. I went through, I think I read every book there ever was in that couple of months, between audiobooks out a walk and books just as I was reading. But the more I was learning, the more fascinated I was with the way your mind worked. And this is actually why I went into it in the first place. I was so fascinated with the way your brain works and how you can condition it one way or another, and how a lot of the things you believe are just shit you've learned, and you can go and learn something new. And the more I was reading, the more I'm like, oh my God, but there's only a certain level you'll take yourself to without that. Almost, for me, it's confrontation. I kind of need the confrontation of like, how much is the shit you want to deal with and how much is the shit you need to deal with. So yeah, I had kind of got myself to a point. I went on this wagon. Ask anybody that knows me. I read a book and they hear about it for months. They just don't shut up about it. But I went on this wagon and I got so excited by it and so interested in it. And it was like, right, what else can I unpack? And then I got the appointment, started to think, and I remember it clear as it was so. She would say to me at the end of every session, she's like, can you stop doing the session before we do the session? I'm like, but I love this. This is great. It's so exciting. She's like, you're killing my job though. I've got nothing left. But there's always something left. Like, there's so, oh yeah, it's amazing.
What's therapy like? It's something that I've spoken about recently where I feel like I lack mental discipline, where there's certain things I commit to, like running, where I had a couple of years where it was just ridiculous. I mean, I would get up at 4 or 5 in the morning and run 12 miles to work, and I was just committed. And then I'd done this with other stuff, but I feel like I lack the mental discipline to stick things long enough, or stick them as long as I should, to help me get better.
What is therapy like for anybody that's never been like myself? Here, explain it to me how the process is for you.
Picture someone taking a grenade and launching it at you, and then catching you and piecing you all back together.
Fair enough.
I don't know if that describes it well. And I guess I can only speak to my own experience. It'll be different for everybody. You have this, like, there's certain things that, whether you like to admit it or not, there's like no matter how amazing your relationship is with Siobhan, there's only certain things you really open up about. And there's a certain layer of you having to protect this identity of who you are. With anybody you know, it's so, and it's like a defense mechanism. Like you're maintaining this character. Put yourself in a room with a stranger with a confidentiality agreement, anything goes.
Did you find it difficult to talk at first and it got easier, or did it just come easily enough for you?
They're really clever at what they do. They're it's almost like they're trained in it. But no, at first it was quite intense, and it was a whole new world. And it's, I actually remember this really interesting. So that a lot of it, whether you had the best upbringing in the world or the worst upbringing in the world, that's what's made you who you are, and that's what's made a lot of the, even like a really positive upbringing can create a really like kind of self-sabotaging habit off the back of it. But I remember having this guilt round, like I knew it was an okay thing to do, to go through the process was fine, but I was like, nothing's wrong, like nothing's happened to me, I've not been through anything, I've not been traumatized, I've not had, like, I've got no right to claim this person's time, essentially, which again is really interesting. But I remember going into the first session and she was like, tell me a bit about your life and your upbringing. And I'm like, yeah, my life's great. She's like, I've got a job, I'm dealing with a stressful situation right now, and just kind of could do with kind of guiding myself through it. But yeah, other than that, everything's fantastic. And she was like, okay, right. So how's your relationships with your family? And I'm like, yep, amazing, absolutely brilliant. Got such a supportive family. My mum's great, like great relationship with my sister, my brother, blah 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 blah, chatting through. All right, okay. And what about your dad? Well, I lost my dad when I was 18, but I dealt with that. That's like, it was really sad, but like I got there and I got through that. And she was like, right, okay, right. And she's like writing her wee notepads and just going through it. And you know, that's something I don't think I've actually dealt with until the last few years. It very much became and you don't realise it, but it starts to, there was so much solidified at that time. Like when anything traumatic happens, it solidifies so much in your body, and you either hold it or deal with it or in whatever way, but it's going to have an impact. And my way of dealing with that at the time was, right, how can I look after everybody else? And that's a fundamental part of who I am. Is it means so much to me to look after other people. And it's the biggest thing I learned probably is how to manage when I'm doing that to my own detriment, and how to manage when I'm doing it in a healthy way. But that was probably the biggest mind blower, which sounds crazy. Like, how can your dad die and not have such an effect? But I really didn't realise that it did. But I essentially shut down at about 18 and shut down for about 10 years in this survival mode of just shit happens, get on with it.
It's quite deep, Karen. That's quite deep.
I can go deeper if you want.
No, it's obviously I've never been through that, so obviously I can't speak about how it would feel, but obviously that makes a massive impact. But you think your words you used along the lines of, it's sad and it happened, but we got on with it, it's all right. Clearly it wasn't. What kind of did the psychologist keep probing and probing, or I'm quite interested in that because I don't really know how it works.
I'm going to do an experiment. Before we do the next episode, you're going to go and try it and come back and tell me. You need to, honestly, the big thing for me is what you learn about yourself in the process, and you learn a lot about why you do the things you do, and not that there's anything wrong with them, but you just learn a lot about them, and you start to understand yourself better. And there's a lot of, I can see where I held myself back a lot in life through, everyone's got their own limiting beliefs. A big one for me and a massive one for me was about not being good enough, and that's really,
What
really
sense?
common.
In what sense?
Just this this underlying belief that fueled everything. This is me giving you like the logical explanation of it now. I didn't understand how it manifested over the 10 years. Now I can look back and see I played small in a lot. I didn't really put myself out there. I didn't try a lot of things because, I can't do that. Like I'm not good enough for that. I can't try that. But really understanding where that comes from is so interesting. And looking back, I remember this was, as a family, this was a really interesting one to move through, because you kind of, when I'm saying everything comes to your childhood, it really does, but it's not about blaming anybody, and it's not that it's anybody's fault. But I remember I was 18 at the time and loved a night out, like what any 18-year-old done. And I remember the phase when he passed. And then I remember just growing up really fast and then getting into this, what does everybody else need mode for years. But when you focus on what everybody else needs, you forget what you need, and it starts to not matter. And then on the flip side of that, the not good enough thing, I realised came from, I think, just after we were planning the funeral. And as we were planning the funeral, I remember we were talking about what everybody was doing. At this point, my brother had went off to America and was doing whatever he was doing. My sister worked in the jail at the time, and my mum was kind of giving a bit of a spiel about everybody. And she was like, Karen's just a party animal. She's daddy's girl. Like my dad loved the night out. That was kind of his thing. We got on great. But I didn't realise until 10 years later, all I heard in that sentence is Karen's just. Mm. And I didn't remember this until I looked back at it. And she never done anything wrong. She meant it really endearingly, and she meant it really as a she's daddy's girl, and that's like exactly who he is, kind of thing. But you don't realise the impact something like that has years down the line. And it doesn't come from nowhere. Like, it wouldn't have solidified in anything if there wasn't already like your normal teenage beliefs that you're maybe not, like, you're insecure and all that. But really understanding that 10 years later, I was like, oh shit, everything I've been telling myself for the last 10 years wasn't true. And it's so empowering, like so unbelievably empowering. And yeah, I don't know, it just unlocks this new world that you wouldn't know existed when you start to realise a lot of the stories you've told yourself over the years.
You've spoke about being frantic, then kind of gone and seen somebody, and how were you kind of months after that, before you've made the decision to leave? Mentally, were you feeling a better place, or did you think I still need to make this big change to help progress and continue to progress and better myself?
It's not so much needed the big change. So interest, like traveling for me is something I always wanted to do, but I never done it because, and I never done it because, and I never done it because. There was always something. There was always somebody else's life situation that got in the way of it. So stories that I had made up, though, the situations that I had put myself in. So when I was young and my dad had passed at the time, everything became about making sure my mum was okay and making sure that she was looked after and she was safe. And not my job as a child, not something she expected of me, but that was my way of coping with what I was dealing with at the time. Is I'm looking after her, she's going to be okay, therefore, like, I'm okay. And then that kind of progressed. It was this itch that was always there. I got in this pattern of like putting everyone else's needs first, that kind of just always got shelved. And it got to that point that I was like, enough's enough. And this is nobody's doing this to me. I'm not doing the things that are for me. And that's why I feel out of joint, is the only really way of like explaining it. Is like, I'm not the last 10 years of my life, I've been doing the things that are like expectations, and I've created this expectation of myself that that's who I am. And it's not. But I don't know who the hell it is. And you know that cheesy, like, you go and find yourself in Bali thing? I get it. And it's not like, and that's kind of when traveling comes back, to take yourself out of your environment, see what happens. But when you were asking about when you move on to get to the end of the process and still to make this big change to be happy, it's not really about that. At the end of it, I actually felt great before I started it. Felt even better as I went through it. But the travelling wasn't the running away part. It was more that actually I'm going to do the thing that I really want to do, and why should I not? And it was like accepting, why should I not do the thing that I want to do? And this is what feels right to me, whether it's crazy or not. This is what feels right to me, and I'm going to do it.
You touched on earlier as well about reading books. Me and you spoke a few times kind of during particularly the first lockdown, because I know that you like Stephen Bartlett, James Smith, Brian Keane, guys that I listen to and I read their stuff. And it was actually, it was you that put me onto Brian Keane, and I ended up listening to one of his audiobooks and stuff. Did that stuff have a big impact on your life at that period? Because like you said, you were struggling, everybody was struggling, but you were struggling with your stuff, and reading books for people like that, did that make a big impact on you at that time?
Huge. Yeah, and it's about challenging your way of thinking. You get so set in your own thought patterns and beliefs, and what I love about them is and I still love it to this day, anybody that can challenge my way of looking at something. And I think it's so important to do it, and to do regularly. If you stick with your own narrative, your own everything, there's plenty of books I've read and I thought, this doesn't resonate with me at all. And there's other things that have really made me think, and there's some things that I've really reacted to. And they're the ones that I sit back and I'm like, oh, why was I so offended by that? And that's usually when there's something true in it. But yeah, massively. And it's just about giving yourself the tools that they don't teach this stuff in school when you're growing up. And it's very much I think there's more and more so now. It's becoming more and more like in younger curriculums now. But it's not, you're given the skills to do things in life, but you're not really taught the skills to navigate life, and you kind of just need to wing it with what you were brought up with. And yeah, I think it's just learning different ways of looking at things and dealing with things, and realizing that your mindset doesn't have to be so fixed on something.
See, during that period, and you're reading a lot of the self-help books, was there any particular books or things within books that you started saying, right, for talking sake, there's do this thing every day to help you improve your mindset? Was there anything like that you thought, I will start trying this and implementing this in my life to see if this makes a difference to me?
There's a few. I've tried loads of different things over the years. Do you mean like what would be the thing that made a difference?
Was there anything in particular that stuck with you for certain books or certain people saying things, and it just stuck with you, and you tried to implement it in your life and it did make a difference to you?
Yeah.
Maybe should have prepped you for questions like this, to be fair. I'm throwing you right on the spot.
No, you're fine. There's loads. One thing that's always stuck with me is that life can inherently be difficult regardless. Life is going to be difficult. You're going to go through challenges, and that's inevitable. But it's usually difficult for two reasons: that you're staying in your comfort zone or you're pushing yourself out of it. Both are equally uncomfortable, but what do you want at the end of it? I think really realising that, because the more you step out of your comfort zone and try new things, and even just have new conversations, it feels really unsafe and it feels really scary. But is the idea of being where you were, if you weren't happy there, scarier? Mm-hmm. So for me, the thought of going out and finding, I could never have this time 2 say 2 years ago, told you I'd be doing the job I'm doing now or doing whatever I'm doing now, my brain couldn't have even imagined it existed because I was so, I do what I do. But the idea of that being it, knowing it didn't excite me, knowing it didn't, there's nothing in it that lit me up. I'd done it and I went through the motions and I could have done it forever. It was secure. I was all right at it. Don't ask anybody I worked with, but I was all right at it. But there was nothing about it that excited me. And I thought, that's actually more terrifying. Imagine going through life not being excited, not being challenged, not being, just going through the motions of like, I do this thing, I do that thing, and I do the next thing. And I think I was at an event last weekend and Stephen Bartlett was speaking at it actually. And what somebody said really, really sat with me. I thought it was amazing. And he was, every day in life, he's shitting himself just a little bit. And that's kind of how you know you're living. Like, when did you last shit yourself?
Well, it was a night out a couple of weeks ago. No, see, to be honest, I've felt quite lost in my life. Like, I've got a great life. I mean, I literally wouldn't complain. I've got a great life, but I've almost what I can imagine as being a midlife crisis where you get in films and stuff, guys in their 40s and 50s buy convertibles and nonsense like that. I've had that kind of, what I imagine that feeling's like for the last couple of years, where it's like, this is not what I want in my life. Like, and I mean that generally in work, because everything else I've got in my life, I'm really happy with. But I was like, this is not what I want in my life. So, I don't know. It's just been so stale. That's probably why I do like running. Now I do high rocks. I need something to push myself. And even this, which was scary for me to start, I need stuff like this to push me. Whereas I feel like work has never done that. And I can relate to what you're saying. I understand the mindset you have where working in the prison was not bad. I mean, you work with some of the best people you'll meet in your life. You have a lot of fun, like daily. The fun we would have where at the weekends when we were working and we would literally lock both sets of doors to get into the office, and then the games that we would all play were just ridiculous, and it was brilliant times.
Can you add a bit more context to that to anyone that's outside this conversation?
So,
We lock the door to the office and play games.
that does sound bad. So for anybody that doesn't know, and people who even worked with us won't know this, in our office, you could get in for either side, and basically we would lock the doors at the weekend, and like we would just make up stupid games. And I don't even know how to explain this without it sounding.
It sounds so childish, right?
It was. But
think about it that way. I'm sorry for anybody that's listening to this that still works there, and just that's what happens. But it sounds so childish, but that was our day at work.
like they're always putting tape across the doors, like Darren go filling. I remember when he first joined. I know we're going to kind of away here. I remember when he first joined. I don't know if it was Stuart Harkett or something. Put tape across the door at both sides to get in and out. And the gaffer comes down and everybody gets up to run out because we're on like 20s and 30s, and this is how childish we run up to get out. And the gaffer walks into the tape at one side. Darren Gofillin, who's been in the room the whole time, gets up and leaves to go to the other side and gets his face stuck in the tape as well. And that was the stuff we did, and it was so much fun. It was always fun, but it didn't challenge you.
Got dead behind the eyes.
It didn't challenge you, and I suppose that's where, you know what I'm meaning. Well, that's
it didn't excite you. You weren't passionate about it. No. There was nothing like it didn't light you up. There was no. You were going through the motions. You were having fun while you were doing it. You're making the most of it, but you were going through the motions. You weren't doing anything that excited you. You weren't shitting yourself just a little bit. Like, you were just getting up and doing the thing because you got up and do the thing. And there was no drive in it. And I think that was the big thing for me, is that probably one thing I've learned of myself is how much I love learning. Which is interesting. If you asked me a few years ago, the idea of studying anything or learning anything, I'd be like, doesn't excite me. But I was just really close to it. Whereas now, I just go down rabbit holes and I get really fascinated. But it's because I'm learning things that I'm passionate about. and I'm learning things that really interest me, but I'm learning what interests me in the process as well. And sometimes I'm learning what doesn't. But yeah, it's just finding that thing that excites you. And for me, a lot of the mindset books I was reading, while they were helping me at the time, I was learning something that I was really passionate about. And I was learning something that really interested me. And the more I learn about it and the more I dive into that kind of environment, the more I'm like, the whole world needs to know this. And everybody, like, how can I give this thought process to everybody?
It was something that was in my mind when you were talking about going through therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And because, again, we've known each other a long time and we spoke about certain things like this, was that not something that would interest you, as going and learning, studying something like that to maybe make that a career for you? Or because I know you well enough to know that that interests you and you do like helping people. Is that not something that you've thought about or would like to do?
You know, somebody asked me that exact question yesterday. I was like, I'm laughing. And the answer I gave was going to be the same one. Yes and no, it does really interest me. However, I think there's more ways to help people outside conventional therapy. I think it's amazing and I think everybody should do it. Just like, if anybody's listening to this, go and just do it. Like, experiment. What's the worst that can happen? Like, if you go and it's not for you and you gain nothing out of it, what have you lost? Go and try it, see what happens. You've got nothing to lose in it. There doesn't have to be a crisis. There doesn't have to be anything fundamentally wrong. Treat it like the gym. You don't go because you're fucked. You go because you want the best out of yourself. Go, try it, see what you get out of yourself. It doesn't give you anything, doesn't give you anything. I always think there's a place for that. And I think it's amazing. And would it really interest me to do down the line? Potentially. There's a lot of other things that I think are possible, and a lot of other ways to support people, like the breathwork training I'm doing. I mentioned that. Did I mention that to you?
You did mention it.
Yeah. So something I've done a lot of recently is breathwork. I don't know if you tried it yourself or not tried it, but do you know what it is? No.
No, don't know. Explain it.
Right. It's the closest thing to psychedelics you'll ever get without taking them.
Oh, that's right. I mean, just saying about this.
And it's going to sound woo-woo to, I'm going to guess, to the audience that are listening to this, just getting known, it's going to be people me and you know probably, but it's going to sound woo-woo to a degree. Again, try it. The first time I done it, I was like, you want me to breathe in and out really fast for half an hour and see what happens? What? It is unbelievable. It just takes you, it switches you between the parasympathetic nervous system, and it takes you to this new level of, I can't even explain. I'll get better at putting this into words, but it basically switches off the part of your brain that thinks.
Right.
And it puts you into this really heightened state of presence, and you're just there, and whatever happens, happens. I've had so many different experiences every time I've done it. Every one of them has been like a huge breakthrough in something that I've been dealing with at the time. And it's just, but your thinking brain can't get there. And this is why a lot of people use psychedelics and a lot of mental health treatments and stuff now. The trials they're doing are amazing. But it's to get you out of that thinking brain, because you're trained to block out so much shit, and there's only so much your brain will let in and let you process. There was a really interesting, actually, a documentary on Netflix recently. I haven't really watched the telly, it's not something, but there was this experiment in it, and this girl's family, I think it was her mum shot her dad and the rest of her family in front of her, and she physically has no recollection of it. She cannot recall the event, and everyone around about her knows it happened, and she was there and she was in the room, and she knows that her mum died, but her brain can't accept that her mum murdered her family and murdered herself in front of her. And no matter how much therapy she's been through, they can't get her to acknowledge this happened. And even when they're telling her, it's not like she's like, no, it didn't. Nothing registers. It just, then I can't remember if it was LSD they used, but there was the series, I think it's How to Train Your Brain, but there's a different drug they use in each episode. And I think hers might have been LSD. use this in the therapy, and she relives the experience. And it's not reliving it to traumatize her, but it's reliving it for her to then start accepting and processing that it had happened. And there's a lot of stuff that you go through in life, and it can be really, really minor things. It doesn't necessarily need to be anything massive, but your brain shuts it out and it just stores it in your body, and it just stays there, and you just don't deal with it, and you move through. And there's some really, just the power of being able to switch that thinking part off, and just whatever comes out comes out. And it's not, you can't go into it with intention, really. You can't go into it with this is what I'm going to I always try and control it. I'm like, I'm going to get this today. But you come out with what you need, and sometimes it doesn't make sense, and then a few days later you're like, that's what that was. Like, I had a really interesting one, a month or two ago, last month, and I was really anxious in it and really stressed, and I was like potting about fixing the room and like moving the laptop this way and fixing this bit, and I was really like trying to control the environment, and I was really agitated, and I started to feel really sick. And then at the end of it, the word control came across really heavily. I'm like, I wonder what that means. Like, I don't consider myself an overly controlling person. If anything, I'm completely chaotic, and I'm just like, nah. But I sat with it for ages and I couldn't understand what it was. But I was with a group of friends and family when I done it, like done the session. And it was a few days later, I'm like, I know what it was. It was about controlling myself around family. And that's something I'm massively aware of. Over the last couple of years, I'm like breaking down that barrier that's there of, it's not even a choice, it's just like a switch that's there of being able to really let go round about family. And it's from having that 10 years of shit happens, deal with it, we need to get through this, and we need to plough on, and we need to do it. And that mentality stuck with a lot of family things we dealt with. And that was what came up for me in that session. I'm like, I would never have, like, I knew it was a thing, but I would never have realised how heavy a thing it was. And it almost, I wouldn't let go in the session I was in, and I was so consciously trying to make sure the pillow was sitting in the right place and this was sitting in the right place, because I was just trying to control the environment, control my reaction, control everything in it. And that's what it was. It was the setting I was in. And it's so, that might sound crazy, like how can breathing in and out make you realise that? Try it.
So see, when you're saying breathing in and out, like you said quickly, like what is,
And I'm really simplifying it. There's breathing techniques and stuff you go through. It's like a really deep connected breath, like a circular breath. It floods your body with oxygen. It completely oxygenates your body and then switches that think part off. This really interesting thing happens with your hands, that if anyone ever tries it and no one tells you, no, this is normal, but your hands go into this claw and you can't undo it. I think it's tetany it's called, but your body tingles from head to toe, and then your hands go into this like horrible claw feeling, and it's sore and it's uncomfortable, but it's really normal in the situation. But I luckily was prepped for it the first time someone told me, but I've been in situations where the people have not known and they're like, what is happening to me? And they panic. But it's so normal, and it's to do with the way the oxygen floods your body. But yeah, it's just, I don't even know what the question was. I'm fascinated by it.
To be honest, you've taken me away.
I'm quite intrigued by this. Yeah. And because
I'll be qualified in a few months, so I'll guide you through it.
Good, because when you actually told me about this, I remember when we spoke a couple of weeks ago about you coming on, and I remember I'm bad for, say, like on my phone, if I go into the internet, I open up a new tab for everything I go into, so I've got like 40 odd tabs sitting there.
Yeah.
And I remember opening one specifically for this episode on what you're talking about, and then I completely forgot about it, and then I went back to it, and my plan was I was going to read about it, and I completely forgot.
Well, once I'm doing my facilitators course, when I'm about halfway through, I need practice clients, so I'll be coming to you.
Definitely, it's something I'm interested in. Right, something I wanted to talk to you about. Have you seen my my reel that I did on Instagram the day? It was going through your Instagram because basically this has been the hardest episode for me to prep for because there's nothing about you online. Like, there's no podcast, there's no anything in the papers or anything I could read. So, as much as I've known you for the last few years, we've not known each other particularly well. So, I had to go on your Instagram, and I have literally seen pretty much every post that you've ever put on. But one you did about, I don't know, maybe a year and a half ago was the 10 things you love about yourself. And you said it's sanity, not vanity. And it's something that really struck a chord with me. And that's why when I was at my walk, I decided to do a reel on it. Can you explain the thinking for you behind that post, even if you don't remember it or if you do remember it? But what was that process for you with the 10 things you love about yourself?
Maybe similar to what you were sharing, actually. So you were chatting about it earlier on. You were like, you were essentially asked the question and you realised you don't know the answer. And I think for me, I can't remember how it came up or how it became a thing, but I thought, I know before it used to feel really uncomfortable, like to talk about yourself in a positive way is it can almost feel like you're, I don't know, big-headed, or you're, I don't know, arrogant, or there's maybe a judgment round about it. And that's something that's not the case for me anymore. Like that's just a massive shift for me. But I realised that it can be really hard to just sit back and think, like, can I list 10 things I love about myself? And that shouldn't be difficult. You could do it. If I said to you, tell me 10 things you love about Siobhan, you could rattle them off like that. At least 9. At least 9. But do you know what I mean? It would be really easy and it would be really natural. And for the people round about you, it's so easy to do. Turn it back on yourself. It should be just as easy. It should be just as natural, and it should be, but it's not. And I think it's like, sit back and think about it and think how you're speaking to yourself and think how that then holds you back. If you can't say anything nice about yourself, like, if that's whatever you believe about yourself is how you like outwardly portray yourself, basically. So if you can't operate out with what you believe. So if you don't believe you're good enough for something, or you don't believe that you're capable of something, that's true.
The story you tell yourself is basically what becomes your reality.
Yeah, and whatever you believe is true.
Because when I was thinking about it today, and I was like, literally, I went to the shops and it was like a 20-minute walk, and I lost all time when I was walking. It was like, this is so uncomfortable. And I even felt uncomfortable in the video when I felt like I couldn't put it across how uncomfortable I felt. And it was just like, how I started thinking, why can I not say these things? And it's like the sanity, not vanity. Where to me, I'm thinking, well, if I say this, then that's quite vain, and somebody will think, well, why do you think that that's good about you or whatever? But I suppose it's not really about what other people think, it's what you think. And it's funny, because I put a wee poll thing on Instagram with it, and I think 80% of the people who have kind of gave their opinion on it, 80% of the people said they could not list 10 things they love about themselves.
How wrong is that?
I know. But in my opinion, the 20% that
same
said they could, I was like, well, are you very sure of yourself? And I was like, why have I thought that? Because that's literally where my issue has just been. That's my fear of thinking that.
That was how it came up. I can't remember how it came up for me, but I think if I think back to the post, I think that's what I've wrote in it is, I had done the same. I had done a poll of like, can you name anything you love about yourself? And I had pretty much the same overwhelming response. Everybody was like, no. Like a resounding no from everybody. And I'm like, that needs to change. Like that has to change. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to put a list of things out there and like let people see it's not that bad. Like, it's not big-headed. It's not vanity. Like, I'm not being like, oh, look at me, I'm amazing. Even if I'm amazing. But not in a I'm better than anybody else way. But I think I'm a great person, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
It's hard to verbalise that, like, because there's certain things you know you're good at, and you know that's why people like you, because you provide certain qualities. But it's a difficult thing to do, and it's just something I wanted to touch on, because when I read it,
Why do you think it's difficult?
It just makes me feel so uncomfortable. It's like, I know that pretty much everything I've ever done in my life, I've been reasonably good at pretty much everything I've ever done. but it still makes me feel uncomfortable to say out loud, I'm good at this and I'm good at that. And it's just, I feel uncomfortable even talking about it right now, to be honest. But we'll move on to the next part. We'll move on to you traveling. You decide to take the jump. You go to Mexico. How was that for you when you thought, I'm doing this, and you're away?
Really calm. As I say, like, it just, the process for me was really, I think I'd made the decision that long before I'd made the decision, but the actual process of going, like, I don't know. You know, when people get really excited in the airport, I'm just like, oh, I'm in the airport, I'm doing this thing and I'm going here. Like, I don't know, it's just really, but some of the experiences are amazing. Like, some of the things that, just situations I've been in the last year or two that I just would never have imagined. Like,
You've not, the thing is, a lot of the places you went, they're not exactly, you've been to some big cities, but it's not like you went to capital cities everywhere and you lived a life that would probably be more similar to here. You went to some places, and just looking at your Instagram stories, it's smaller towns and stuff, and that must have been quite a good experience to just see a different pace and a different style of life.
yeah, the one thing I said before I went is I want to live a normal life in an abnormal place. Like, I wasn't, don't get me wrong, I've done some like really not day-to-day things, but I was never looking for like anything crazy. Like, I wanted to get up in the morning, get my coffee, go and walk by the water. Like, anybody that knows me, like, walkies and water are like my two, I'm like a dog. Like, walkies and water are my two favourite things in the world. Feed me and I'm happy. Like, I think I'm quite simplistic in that sense. I really don't need or do a lot. Like, if I can go for a nice walk, be in the water, like I'm going to Cyprus tomorrow just so that I just want to be in the water. So I'm going to go just have a
Do you know
swim.
we've got water here?
It's fucking cold. It's really cold. But that's what I'm really looking at. Don't get me wrong, I'm going to spend time with friends over there. They're basically family, but I'm not going to do anything wild. I'll work for the week, I'll have my normal day, and I'll spend time in the water, and it'll be amazing. But yeah, the little towns and little places that you end up, you kind of just meet people. So there were no plan or itinerary, but you just kind of meet people along the way and you get ideas, you have conversations. I had a really embarrassing conversation in Mexico when I first got there, actually. My Spanish clearly wasn't good at the time, but I was chatting away and asking somebody for advice on places to go and different things, and they kept talking about this place, Oaxaca, and how Oaxaca was amazing and really need to visit there. It's one of the top things you have to visit. And I was like, oh, okay, I've never heard of that. Like, it's amazing you just learn about these new places. Then he brings up the map and shows me where it is. And I'm like, I've been calling that Oaxaca. So it's spelled like Oaxaca, I think. So I've been telling people on my list of things to go, I'm going to Oaxaca. Nobody corrects me. This guy tells me about this new place, Oaxaca, and I'm like, wow, this sounds fantastic. Bunch of the same place. Yeah, it's like the whole Milgai thing.
Well, where's because you did quite a bit in Mexico and you've done quite a few interesting places. Where's your favourite place that you've been so far?
Cape Town.
I knew you were going to say that.
Hands down.
What was so special about Cape Town?
I don't know. There's just a feeling to it. And I don't know if again, sometimes I can't explain stuff like this, but there's loads of places I've been that I've loved and I thought are brilliant. There was something different about Cape Town. And it just blew my mind, completely blew my mind. The people, the diverse amount of stuff you can do in such a small space. Like, you can get up in the morning, climb a mountain, go and swim in the sea, go to a really fancy restaurant, go and just do yoga on the beach, like, all within about 20 minutes each other. And it's so there is so much to do. You can go and see wildlife an hour down the road. Like, but it's just the most amazing city. And I think it's got such a bad rep. The amount of people that thought I was going to die in Cape Town because it's got this safety rep. The same with Mexico, actually. I think people have this preconceived notion of what they see in the news.
Yeah.
But anybody outside of Glasgow that watches the news would bloody never visit. Like, why the hell would you do that to yourself?
The stab capital of Europe.
Yeah, but do you know what I mean? People go by those misconceptions. I think people miss out on a lot and have a lot of, like, I would have no hesitation to say to you to take the family there. It's unbelievable. I've been chatting to my sister about it. I want to go back at some point and take the kids and let them go and experience it. And it's just amazing. The people are so friendly and there's a vibe of home to it as well. And I think that might be what it is. There was this, like, Scotland will never not have this massive place. Wherever I am, Scotland will never not have this massive place in my heart. But there was this, I was driving to, I can't remember if it was the retreat I went on or if it was the safari. It was a long drive anyway. And it was like driving through Glencoe. You just drive this road, the mountains are everywhere. The only difference is it's sunny. But I remember looking at it, I'm like, I feel like I'm really, really surreal. Like, I've just shut my eyes and woke up driving through the middle of Glencoe. And I sent my sister pictures of it. Never said a word, just sent her pictures of the view. She was like, when did you come home? And it looks like it. It's just, there's something magic about it.
I think you're right when I was actually thinking about it while you were talking before you mentioned it. You get the preconceived notions of, like, Cape Town, you're like, oh, well, that could be a bit iffy. I suppose it's a major city, and like you say, Glasgow will have some reputation, where for us it's
home, and that's where you go and spend your time. Cyprus, you worked in Cyprus as well, and obviously you came back there. I seen the pictures where you were swimming, and, like, I don't know if it was a sea you were swimming in, and then later that day you were sledding in the sun.
Yeah.
Where was that?
Cyprus.
I know that, but where in Cyprus is this?
Troodos up the mountain. So my friends stay down the south of the island. So Troodos is about an hour for them, and it's the highest point in Cyprus. But yeah, it's like an hour's drive. So we got up in the morning, we went for a dip in the sea, sunshine, shorts, t-shirt. An hour later, up to here in snow. It was brilliant. It's insane, like, so surreal. But you drive so far up the mountain. On the way up to Troodos, you drive most of the way up, and it's blue sky. We played a game with the kids to occupy them in the car, actually. Just got them to watch the temperature gauge going down. So we started off at, say, 12 or something, whatever it was at, and just watch it going down and down and down. I'm like, it's your job, your sole mission this whole journey is to keep an eye on that, and we need to know when it changes. So they would, like, intently stare at it, and it would only change every 10 minutes, but it just meant it was the only thing they said every 10 minutes because they wanted to win the game. But yeah, then you get to, like, maybe a third away from the top of the mountain, and snow just appears out of nowhere, and 2 seconds later it's up to here. It's so cool.
Yeah, it was quite interesting because I actually thought that, because obviously Laura and the kids were there, your mum was there and stuff, I actually thought that you were in America visiting your brother or something, and that was what it was. I didn't realise until I looked at the story that you were in Cyprus, and it was just kind of such a change within the one day.
It's insane.
See, when you're away, because obviously seeing the pictures and stuff, you met a lot of different people.
Mm-hmm. Was
that quite a difficult experience, trying to make friends, or was it quite natural and it just happened quite easily?
This makes me laugh. It's so hard not to meet people when you're away. Like, you can't get away from it, but sometimes I'm really antisocial. Like, until I find my people, sometimes I can be really antisocial, and sometimes you can't get away from people. And it's not like, you will never struggle to meet people when you're traveling. You just won't. Like, it can be really uncomfortable sometimes if you're not willing to put yourself in that situation. It can, maybe you can isolate yourself easily, or you can surround yourself by a million people. The one thing for me that got quite frustrating was how hard it was not to meet people. Because I love time on my own. Like, I'm really social, but I also love time on my own. So going in like hostels and stuff, I actually stayed in a hostel for 2 or 3 weeks at one point, and I was the only person in it, and it was phenomenal. But yeah, you go through, you meet so many people, but it's quite transient. So you can almost like you really get to pick or choose. Like it's not, you're like, I like you, and I'm going to hang about with you again, and I'm going to stay in touch with you. And I've met some amazing people that I'll always stay in touch with. And some of them, when I've been away, I've maybe known them for a day when I've been away, or a day or two, but I'll stay in touch with them. And there's some people that I might have spent 3 weeks with and I will never see or speak to again, but they're like an amazing experience and an amazing part of. One thing that I've learned to really, really be true about myself is nothing, well, apart from this podcast, thanks, Paul, nothing happens after 8 p.m.
Well, when you get 2 young kids, most stuff happens after 8 p.m. for me. That's the best time of the day for me.
Oh no, I'm like, I just have this switch that I just started, like, my eyes closed. I had a coffee late in the afternoon because of this.
How different your life is from what it used to be.
I know, my life. Yeah, no, that's another thing. Like the idea of like a night out or like it just does nothing about it excites me. And I remember finding that really uncomfortable at first. Like, and I used to laugh. One of my friends, like the girl I lived with for about a month or two in Mexico, she'd be like, "Well, what are you doing tonight?" I'm like, "Well, it depends what you mean by tonight. Like, if it's after 7, I've got my bed, but it depends what you're doing. If you want to go for dinner early, I'll go. Like, I love going for food, love going out, but I'm not doing it after 8 p.m. It's not happening." So we would do, like, we had loads of, like, I would hang about with them during the day. We would do all the day plans. Everybody would be getting ready to go out tonight, and I'm like, "See you later, I'm out of my bed."
That wasn't you.
Oh, it's me.
You before.
I know, it's just not my thing at all. And I think that party mode's almost an escapism for just not really being content in where you're at.
I can agree in a sense. It's good to have those nights out in the fun. I always feel worse when after doing it. It never quite feels as good as it could have been.
Yeah, it's just like, I don't get me wrong, like I love days out with friends doing, like, I love it, but the idea of a night out, that whole going off the rails and getting like minging just because your life's that shit during the week, like, yeah.
That's fair enough. Before we finish up, what's next for you? Are you just going to take it as it is, or do you have anything in mind that you're aiming for or where you'd like to go?
The next thing for me will be going through this facilitator's course. So I'll be doing that over the next couple of months. That in itself is going to be an interesting journey. So I've got that coming up over the next few months, and then kind of see where that takes me, to be honest. My hope is to be facilitating, and in what capacity, I don't know. Whether there's potential opportunities, it could be part of my existing job, it could be a business I run on the side. The how doesn't really matter to me the now. It's just important to me that I get to share it and other people get to experience it. So yeah, just that's kind of the next chapter for me, is seeing how that unfolds over the next year.
Well, I think that's a good place to finish. This has been an episode I've actually been really looking forward to doing, and I know you never answered me for about a day and a half. I thought, she's going to pull out of this, and I would have, and I came and got you if you had. But this has been an episode I've looked forward to, and it's probably one of the most interesting interviews I think I've ever done. So I appreciate you giving up your time, because I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope you did as well.
Oh, it's been so much fun. Yeah, I love it. I love this. I could chat all day.
Oh, I know that.
But for me telling you I was shitting myself nervous before it, like, actually I could have these conversations all day long. Like, this stuff genuinely excites me.
I think it's good to have that. This is my therapy, I suppose. It's good to have stuff like this. But again, I appreciate you getting up your time, especially after 8 o'clock, because I know how hard that is for you.
I'll be sleeping.
But I appreciate it. And for everybody who's watched and listened, genuinely appreciate it. If you could like this episode and subscribe to the channel, it would mean a lot to us. And Karen, thanks again.
Thanks. See you later.